Hey everybody, and welcome to I Can't Believe It's Not News, your favorite podcast about fake news. I'm Beth.
And I'm Kelly.
Hey Kelly, can you hear me today?
I can hear you.
Hey, guess what?
What's up?
I think I figured out my fucking microphone problem.
Yay! And you're in a bigger room.
Yeah. So the last couple episodes have been really frustrating with my audio, and it was really pissing me off. And I'm sure maybe our listeners too, because it sounded fucking horrible.
Yeah. And just so you know, it sounds fine when we record it.
Oh, yeah.
So we don't always know until we go back and listen again. And then we're like, oh.
Yeah.
That's
it's
not
like
good.
when I'm editing and then I'm like, well, why does it sound like that? That sounds terrible. So anyway, hopefully we've gotten it figured out. I am not an audio genius. I am just an audio savant. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah. But apologies if we have burned your ears with static, and please stick with us. We are trying. And by the way, if you went over to Patreon and gave us $1 a month, I could afford better equipment. Ha ha ha. Just wanted to get that in there. Okay, so last time we started a 3-episode series on voting.
Yes, we did.
So what did we talk about last time? You remember?
We talked about political ads.
Yes.
I was just re-listening to it yesterday in the car with my son, who thinks that it's great and we should have him on.
Oh, I'm sure. Well, he's not of voting age yet, so not in this series.
Yeah, not this series.
Because we do not support voter fraud.
Yes. We do not support it.
Just FYI, up front.
Yeah.
Not a supporter of voter fraud.
No.
Which leads us to part 2 of our series. That was such a smooth segue.
It was. I liked your transitions.
Yes. I feel like Jason Kander right now. Soothe. But smooth transition.
Smooth.
Yeah. So today we are going to talk about voter fraud, which, if you remember, this was my conspiracy theory of the year that I picked for my favorite conspiracy theory episode.
I didn't even remember that was your conspiracy theory.
I snuck
That's
it
how fast some of these things just leave.
I
They're
know.
just like, no, you've done so much research. You're done.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I snuck in my favorite and then just
awesome.
Told you live on air.
Yeah. That's fine. That's fine. It's a surprise no matter what.
Right. No, but this is, I think, an important topic to talk about. So here's the thing. We have this president, DJT, and he claims that 3 million fraudulent votes were cast in the 2016 election.
Right.
And he, he announced on Twitter, his favorite medium for announcing things.
Yes.
That he was, so when was this from? This was from January 25th of 2017. I will be asking for a major investigation into voter fraud. That was the all caps.
Mm-hmm.
Including those registered to vote in 2 states, those who are illegal, and ... even, those registered to vote who are dead, and many for a long time, in parentheses. Depending on results, we will strengthen up voting procedures, !
He's so smart, Beth.
He's a douchebag, but okay.
Yeah. This was like 4 days after he was sworn in, 4 or 5 days after he was sworn in as president. Like, that's the kind of thing that was on he's like, I'm in my first week. You know what I'm really concerned about? All those illegal people. I know I'm sitting in the presidency, but I'm really still worried that I did not win the popular vote. And look at all these women who just went out and walked in protest of me. We're going to start a commission.
The thing is, it should have been like Hillary being like, there must have been voter fraud. Like, how the hell did DJT get elected? But yeah, he gets elected and he's the one that's like, voter fraud! Melania was like, there has to have been voter fraud. This can't be happening. Please turn back time.
Right.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, for sure.
Right? Okay, Kelly, break it down for us.
Okay, so back when Donald Trump was in San Francisco, he went on a stump speech. This is in April of this year. He was still talking about how there was major voter fraud and claimed that there were as many as 5 million illegal votes counted And that was a national number, just, out of his butt. Here's some numbers that I'm going to come up with.
Can I put a moratorium on ever talking about DJT's butt?
Nope.
Please.
No, I mean, I can't make promises like that.
All right. Just saying.
I wish I could. Yeah, no, because it's just really funny. And I'm probably going to talk about his butts. I'd love to just make him look like an idiot all the time. That way people actually saw what he really is.
Just let him be. Okay, so he says 5 million people now. It's gone up from 3 million.
Right. So it's 5 million people that he claims voted illegally throughout the nation. And of course, he said that when he was in California. So the Secretary of State, who is the person who's in charge of your elections for the entire state, tweeted right after that Trump's dishonesty and baseless rants about widespread voter fraud dishonor the thousands of local election officials and volunteers in California who work hard to administer our elections with integrity. He also delivered a massive burn by saying the only fraud is the occupant of the Oval Office.
Ooh, okay. That was
Which I love the way California fights back. Like, California is like, no, gloves off. We don't like you.
California's like, look, we have the 6th largest economy in the world. We're bigger than most countries. F off. Like,
get out. You're done. And this is still just, I mean, this is earlier this year, but he's been going on about this forever. And I'm sure that this guy is just tired of it. I mean, I would be.
Right. Okay. So, got anything else for me before I dive in here?
Yeah. So there's also a fact-checked article.
Okay.
Factcheck.org
That's a
article.
hard one. Fact check.
Yeah. It's not so great, but it's a great article, and it's a great reminder that, of course, what he's talking about is not true. And every time it gets brought back up, they have to prove again and again and again and again and again and again and again that it's not true. But there's never been any truth to this. And even his own voter fraud commission found that there was no evidence of this. I know, shocker.
It's like, but this is reminding me of like when you're a parent and like you have to go into your kid's room every night and shut the closet door because they're afraid there's a monster in there. And you're like, no, there's really no monster in there. Like literally, like this really is like 0.0000001% possibility that there's an actual monster in your closet. Like,
right.
I'm sure like if you lived like seriously in a cabin, like in the woods, there could be a bear in there, but like,
could be.
Yeah. And maybe you could, I'm just saying like, and every once in a while, yes, there's a mass murderer in there. We do listen to My Favorite Murder. That has happened. But like, This is like literally like the voter fraud is the monster under the bed when you're a parent.
Yeah. It's really, and I feel like that analogy is so honestly so perfect because it is pretty much 0.0000001% of actual voter fraud. But we'll get into that in a little bit because I wanted to ask you. So the only thing I was going to really bring up about this fact check article is that they have all these dates at the bottom of how many the other times that they've had to show that this is not true. And it's so ridiculous because it's always him and it's always just, it's a dog whistle at this point, and he uses it and people respond to it and he gets the kind of reaction that he wants, which is just, playing into their hatred of illegal immigrants, because that's most of it, and their idea that corruption only exists on the Democratic side.
That's right. That is what they're playing into. It's all about build the wall. Okay, so here's the thing. Like, you and I know that there's no voter fraud, and we know that because we've read, I don't know, almost any sane publication that is like, there's literally no voter fraud. And like, when you look at like your state, they'll go back 10, 20, 30 years and there'll be like 5 cases of voter fraud. And usually it's like even something that's pretty explainable where like somebody messed up, and like that lady in Texas who thought she was eligible to vote and voted and then got convicted of voter fraud because she wasn't eligible as due to her criminal record at that time or something like that. I don't know, do you remember that case?
I don't remember that particular case, but I know that it happens. I know that people don't, because it's not that way in every single state. Some states allow you to vote if you have a felony and some states don't. And I can imagine if you move to a state, but you had a felony in a different state, now you can't vote. And I could see how that happens. I could even see how it happens that you're just like, I didn't even know that I wasn't allowed to vote.
Like, so it's very rarely like nefarious where like people are actually really trying to get away with something as individuals. Right. Okay. So let's talk about this, because we know that there is no voter fraud and that this is ridiculous. But what are people who are maybe conservative hearing and seeing that's making them feel like this voter thing is a problem? Okay. So I went straight to the source. Do you know where I went?
Did you go to Breitbart?
I went there too, but guess where else I went?
Where did you go?
The Heritage Foundation, baby.
Oh, geez.
So let's take a look.
Yeah.
They have a map. Okay. So on the Heritage Foundation website, it says issue election fraud cases from across the United States. The Heritage Foundation's elections fraud database represents a sampling of proven instances of election fraud from across the country. This database is not an exhaustive or comprehensive list. Ding, ding, ding. There's more out there, but is intended to demonstrate the many ways in which fraud is committed. Preventing, deterring, and prosecuting election fraud is essential to protecting the integrity of our voting process. Oh my God, that sounds really scary, right?
I mean, I'm terrified.
I'm terrified of the Heritage Foundation. Can you imagine going to work there? I bet they don't even have free coffee. Okay, they have some tiles here.
Awful.
They have some tiles here that tells you what this says, and it's 1,145 proven instances of voter fraud.
Oh, you know what that would never do?
What?
Change any election at all. I can't imagine. I mean, if you're going to say that there's been less than 1,200, unless you live in a States. Yeah, across the entire country.
Yes.
God, and 992 criminal convictions.
Yes.
Less than 1,000. Like, I get that they're saying this isn't an exhaustive list, but are you kidding?
So they have this like interactive map where you can like choose this and click on it, or you can open the printable report. So I opened the printable report and I didn't even get through Alabama. It's like, I'm reading these things and I'm like, oh my gosh. So I just picked one and I wanted to just fact check it. Like, okay, did this really happen? Because I super trust the Heritage Foundation, right?
Oh yeah. I mean, why wouldn't you?
Right. So the one I picked, the person's name is Gay Nil Tinker. And I thought I should fact check this. Her name is Gay Neil Tinker. I don't know. I just want to make sure this is real. Sorry, Gay. Yeah. You're a real person. The outcome was a criminal conviction, and this is the fraudulent use of absentee ballots. And this is something I was kind of seeing throughout this as I was scrolling. So here's what they said. Gay Neil Tinker, a former circuit clerk for Hale County, pleaded guilty to multiple counts of absentee ballot fraud after her scheme to orchestrate fraudulent absentee ballots for the benefit of multiple candidates was uncovered. She admitted to falsifying the ballots of 5 voters to benefit certain candidates, including her brother, Circuit Court Judge Marvin Wiggins, and her husband, Senator Bobby Singleton, a Democrat from Greensboro. And I thought, this sounds really juicy. I have got to fact check. There was an article in the Tuscaloosa News, and it is from September 1st of 2010. And it says ex-clerk guilty in voter fraud. So this is what it says. Through her attorney, she admitted to falsely certifying the absentee ballots of 5 voters. The ballots, her attorney said, were notarized by her despite inconsistent signatures spelling. So what that says to me is that she was the clerk and she notified 5 ballots that they maybe had like concern about it being the right due to a signature and the spelling. So she didn't print out some absentee ballots and fill them out to like get her brother elected and her husband.
Yeah.
She basically certified somebody's ballot who maybe has a bad signature. Is that how it sounds to you?
I mean, it kind of does. And I know that my stepdad didn't vote for years. The first time he voted was when Obama ran for president, and he registered to vote. as a, a person who is way older than you should be when you register to vote.
Right.
And he had never, ever voted before. And the first time he voted, he wanted to vote for Obama. And he's the person who looks the opposite of what you would think an Obama voter looks like, which is why it's always so funny to me. But because he is a firefighter paramedic and they have certain on-call days, he would just do absentee ballot so that he never had to, you can go, but if you're exhausted from a call, you don't want to do that. Right. So he just did absentee ballot, and he had it sent back because of his signature one year. This is in Florida, of course. But he had it sent back because of his.
Just write, "It's okay, I'm white," and send it back.
Yeah, no, I don't. I think it only works if you're there in person.
Oh, okay. Just curious.
Yeah, I mean, I think that would work if you were there in person, but
they don't have that as a checkbox.
No,
like you can just check, "It's okay, I'm white," and send it back.
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry.
It's too bad. I mean, Florida is probably the first place they would do that, though.
They would do that.
Like maybe Florida, Alabama might also be another place. I'm actually wondering, like, how big this town is. Do you know what I mean? Because
that's a good question.
Because that might be it might be relevant to why her brother is a judge and like her husband her husband is a senator, right?
Yeah, I think he might be like a state senator.
Yeah, but still, like,
so yeah.
I mean, I have a cousin who's been a mayor because there's only like 300 people in that town, if that.
Right.
And I love him, and he's very smart. I'm not saying that he's not, but he was super young and he was a mayor, and he was only a mayor for one term. So I'm just saying that, small towns, sometimes that's like even a family thing. I'm just curious. I'd be curious about how many.
Well, this is like a county. So, but it does say like her.
Oh, yeah. Oh, okay. I see that.
Her lawyer said she's a good person. In this case, she stepped across the line, but her intentions were good. So even in like this, it doesn't sound like the thing that you would do to like get your brother elected is like certify these 5 votes. Like, it just doesn't sound like, it sounds like she was a county clerk and maybe she shouldn't have certified these absentee ballots, right? Like maybe they were just across the line enough that she shouldn't have, but she was like, it's fine. I'm going to let the people vote.
Yeah.
Right?
And it's such a weird thing to do too, because I mean, technically shouldn't it be her say so that she certifies these? Like, who is it that's coming behind her and saying these should not have been certified because the signatures are so inconsistently different? And did they go to those people?
Right.
And say, is this your ballot? It's such a wishy-washy case. And the fact that they had 13 felony charges against her in the beginning is insanity.
So this is kind of the theme that I was seeing as I was through this page, is that a lot of the proven voter fraud cases seem to be more with like clerks and officials and not with individuals at the polling place. And when you talk about the fake news that's around this voter fraud, it's drumming up that individuals are voting fraudulently. It has nothing to do with clerks. You don't hear that. You're not hearing that, you have to elect Republicans to the county clerks so that they won't mess up our elections. Like, you're hearing that illegals are voting and that people are dead are voting. But even the Heritage Foundation can't find that many of those. It's more of these kind of things. So anyway, I also went over to Breitbart. So I found this really fun story that kind of swept across the conservative sites like a senator's sex scandal, It seemed to be pretty popular. It hit all of them.
Yeah.
So this Breitbart headline says, voter fraud, 670 ballots cast in Georgia precinct with 276 voters. Now, this was just posted on August 7th of this year by Catherine Rodriguez.
Oh, I remember this. Wait, was this not? Oh, no. Wait, was this the thing with Doug Jones and the child molester?
No. This is in Alabama. This is Georgia. So it's saying that a northeastern Georgia precinct located in Habersham County had 276 registered voters before the state's primary election in May. but 670 votes were recorded, indicating that 276% of voters turned out in Georgia's primary election. So, okay. So they go on and they talk about this. It just is like BS all the way down. And then this is really weird. This is what it goes in. So down at the bottom, this is what it says. The latest revelation of voter fraud comes soon after the release of Fraud: How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election, a new book by Eric Eggers, the Government Accountability Institute's research director. And then it says, Eggers' book points out that voter fraud is increasingly common and encouraged by left-wing mega donors like George Soros, who support organizations that commit voter fraud. The book also notes that enough voter fraud has been documented to swing a presidential election and is enough of a problem that it could impact the 2018 midterm elections. Okay, I have a theory here. This article was written to promote this book, and that's it. That's the only reason why this article was written. Now,
did you find any other articles that mention the 670 votes?
Yes, every other conservative site, but no actual legitimate news, right? So I found one article that talks about this legitimately.
Yeah.
And it says, voter fraud in Georgia falsely reported. This is posted on News Radio 97.7, Savannah's News Radio.
What?
By Laura Anderson. This is like just local even. Like this hasn't been picked up by the not that I found anyway. Like it could be that I didn't find it, but I couldn't find it. And it says the headline about voter fraud in Georgia's recent primary election caught our attention. So much so that I sent a text about it to Secretary of State Brian Kemp. He responded that it was a county error and that the results I certified are correct. So he said the folks at McClatchy popped out a story from Washington focusing on how Habersham County Mud Creek Precinct had 276 registered voter ahead of the vote, but had 680 ballots cast, which would be alarming if accurate. But the allegation that there were 670 ballots in a precinct with 206 voters is incorrect. There were 670 Republican ballots cast out of 3,941 registered voters in the Mud Creek in Habersham County. So the story is not true at all, okay?
Right.
And a radio DJ was able to verify that by asking the Secretary of State for actual information. Breitbart's reportive finesse is to promote a book. So this book, Fraud: How the Left Plans to Steal the Next Election. Kelly, just a quick question. I'm not stepping on your jam of the week, am I? Is this the book that you read for this week?
No, just so you know, I have not read Eric Eggers. I have not read this latest masterpiece nor any of his previous work.
I'm so shocked you're so well read.
I know. I'll have to really not actually put this on my list because this sounds like it's bonkers.
Well, just so you know,
bananas, and he can keep that.
It's on Amazon for only $21 right now.
What a bargain.
Okay, so I was like, all right, who's this Eric Eggers, right? Like, I have to know. So
Is he related to Nicole Eggers?
I don't know. I didn't get... He doesn't have a Wikipedia page. He's not that important.
Oh.
Okay, Eric Eggers is a researcher, a reporter working for the famed investigative journalist and best-selling author, Peter Schweitzer.
Who's that?
Oh, don't worry. We'll get there. So he works for Peter, and he works for the Government Accountability Institute. A former radio producer and talk show host, Eggers lives in Tallahassee, Florida. So, who is Peter Schweitzer? Let me tell you. Peter Schweitzer is the president of the Government Accountability and an editor-at-large of Breitbart News. What? So, what's this Government Accountability Institute? Do you see how I fell a little bit down the rabbit hole here? Okay, the Government Accountability Institute is a conservative, nonprofit, and I'm going to emphasize that, nonprofit investigative research organization located in Tallahassee, Florida. It was founded in 2012 by Peter Schweitzer and Steve fucking Bannon. Funding from Robert Mercer and family and the Koch brothers. And, okay, this is what they're known for. They wrote a book called Clinton Cash, the untold story of how and why foreign governments and businesses help make Bill and Hillary rich. And Bush Bucks, how public service and corporation help make Jeb rich. They have a theme here. That's literally what they've done. So here's the thing, and this is what's insane. This is supposed to be a non-profit organization, but surprisingly, they pay pretty because a November 2016 investigation by the failing Washington Post. That's the failing New York Times. What does he call the Washington?
I
don't know. I don't know.
Fake news Washington Post?
Yeah.
No, that's CNN. The lying Washington. Who knows? Who knows what they call them?
The Washington Post was actually a very good location. Detailed ties between the Government Accountability Institute and the conservative website Breitbart News. 3 GAI employees received full-time compensation while simultaneously being employed elsewhere. From 2012 to 2015, GAI founder and executive chair Steve fucking Bannon, actually says that in Wiki fucking Bannon because that is his middle name, received $376,000 for working 30 hours a week. He simultaneously served as the executive chairman for Breitbart. And then GAI communications strategist Wenton Hall received $600,000 during the same time period, and he worked as a writer for Breitbart News and was promoted to managing editor in 2013. Now, our famed investigative journalist, GAI president and treasurer Peter Schweitzer, who's also an editor-at-large and writer for Breitbart, $778,000. Am I saying that correctly? I want to emphasize not $78, but $778,000.
Yes,
by
over
the GAI.
$750,000.
Yeah, from 2012 to 2000. So, as a 501c public charity, GAI's political advocacy has raised the question of whether the organization has been illegally intervening in political campaigns. The Washington Post report also found that from 2013 to 2015, GAI purchased over $200,000 in advertising from Breitbart's website.
That doesn't seem like a conflict of interest at all, Beth.
No.
And I say that as someone who works for a 501c3. I'm pretty sure that's not legal.
I'm like, this is insane. But this is what your crazy uncle on Facebook is hearing, and why they think that there's widespread voter fraud when the actually only fraud is that people think there's widespread voter fraud, which necessitates having responses like whole organizations like Let America Vote having to be created just to fight back against unfair voting laws that restrict voting and not to help curb voter fraud.
Right.
There's my rabbit hole.
I really like your rabbit hole. And I like how it touches on exactly the irony that is so much of the current day GOP. And not that it's just current day, but it just, there's so many things that like the Voter Fraud Commission.
the voter fraud?
Sort of, yeah, the Voter Fraud Commission that's more interested in voter suppression than finding out about voter fraud. There's, and creating this idea that there's voter fraud, the Patriot Act that has a lot less to do with patriotism than actually being able to access your stuff. It's just the way that things are named, the Heritage Foundation. It's that thing that it makes you feel like, well, it's fine. It's fine, guys. Everything is fine. The Heritage Foundation, they sound great. They sound like a bunch of really nice white guys who came right off Little House on the Prairie, and they're into their heritage. And if you don't look too hard, you don't notice that they're all just old, rich white guys. You don't notice at all.
No. The sad thing, Kelly, is do you know how long it took me to find 5 minutes?
Oh,
I mean, that
makes me sad.
Right? Like, you don't even have to look hard to find this. Like, it. Anyway. Okay. So, Kelly, what can we do? Like, can we debunk voter fraud myth?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's pretty easy. Like, you just spent 5 minutes and you found all of that information. It took me I believe that this was the first return on my search. How do you prove that voter fraud isn't real? Like, is voter fraud a myth?
Right.
Because that was my honest question. That was kind of what led my research for this article was, is voter fraud a real thing?
Right.
Or is it a myth? And my gut, because of everything I've read, has told me that it's not true. So where I went was to something called the Brennan Center, and I went to their website, and what they had was they have an article called Debunking the Voter Fraud Myth that's on this page, and we'll link to it on our blog, but on this page, they have, and I counted it up earlier, it's over 20 separate reports that go back. Some of them go as far back as 30 years, looking for evidence that fraudulent voting was done to such a degree it actually changed the outcome of a vote. And they found no evidence that that's been the case.
Right.
So their report that they released back in 2017, it's just last year, it's called The Truth About Voter Fraud, and that found that most reported incidents of voter fraud are actually traceable to other sources, such as, like we were talking about before when you were on the Heritage Foundation site, they're down to clerical errors or bad data matching practices. And they reviewed elections that had been studied for voter fraud very, very, very closely and found that incident rates were between 0.0003% and 0.0025%.
Right.
So given this tiny incident for voter impersonation fraud, it's likely, the report has noted that it's likely that an American is more likely to be struck by lightning than to impersonate another voter at the poll.
So, and you and I both found this article. This is like a good article. And I just want to mention the Brennan Center for Justice at the NY School of Law, and it's a nonpartisan law and policy institute that works to reform, revitalize, and when necessary, defend our justice. So they sound
Yeah, and the list that they have, I mean, it's just the first list that they start with was just about the studies. So that's the thing that has over 20 studies. But then they go into court opinions, and they have multiple court opinions about voter fraud, that it basically doesn't exist, and voter fraud laws are largely just for voter suppression. It goes into government investigations and saying that they also agree that voter fraud is rare. So this is a huge sources cited website that you can go down the rabbit hole here, and you can stay within research sources. So don't do that, Beth. You don't need to go to Breitbart.
I have to take the bullet for our listeners and find out why conservatives are sharing this. And I want to point out this paragraph that they have. It really just kind of sums it up well. They say the verdict is in from every corner that voter fraud is sufficiently rare that it simply could not and does not happen at a rate even approaching that which required to rig an election. I mean, it's just like, it's very, very clear in here. And I remember when we were doing that, my favorite conspiracy episode, and we were talking about this, you had brought up Florida, and they have the bullet points here about Florida too. So in 2012, Florida Governor Rick Scott, in an effort to remove non-citizen registrants from the state rolls, the state's list of 100,000 alleged non-citizen registrants quickly dwindled to 198. Even this amended list contained many false positives, such as a World War II veteran born in Brooklyn. In the end, only 85 non-citizen registrants were identified, and only one was convicted of fraud out of a total of 12. Can you imagine having a system with 12 million people and only having one case of fraud? Like, seriously.
I mean, I remember back in 2000 when they were purging voter rolls to make sure that felons couldn't vote, which, if you're in Florida and you go out to vote, please, 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 you may not agree with everything they do, but please go vote to give felons back the right to vote after they're out of prison. This is such a stupid thing that we do. No one else has to pay for crimes after they're out of prison. I mean, you're telling them you have to pay taxes, you have to live in society, you have to check a box that makes sure that you basically get no good job, and now you don't get the chance to vote either. There are people out there who would rather vote to give them their weapons back and give felons Second Amendment rights back rather than give them the chance to vote. Just give them the chance to vote. It's so crazy. So Florida, please, if you're listening, go vote and give back the people the right to vote. Right. They are citizens. They deserve that right. No representation or no taxation without representation. You have to start doing this again.
Right.
So I remember all those people. I remember them being purged from the rolls. I remember even there was a supervisor of election in a county that went to go vote, and they had purged him from the voting roll.
Oh, wow.
Because he had a name, because that's what they do, is they purge it based on like misspellings of a felon's name. Well, if that person's name is like Dan Brown,
right,
or Patrick Brown or something like that, it's likely you're going to catch the wrong person.
Right. Yeah. So Trump, way back in the beginning here, we were talking that he was going to create this voter fraud commission. So Kelly, what happened there? Was that successful?
It was not successful. I know that's shocking.
There was no monster under the bed.
There was no monster. So the article that I pulled for this has an amazing headline. So I'm going to go ahead and read that.
Yes.
The headline to this article is Trump's Voter Fraud Commission, quote, "the most bizarre thing I've ever been a part of," end quote, senior official says.
That's awesome.
So that senior official is a man by the name of Matthew Dunlap, who is the Maine Secretary of State, who...
Wait, say that again.
Yeah.
The state of Maine's Secretary of State.
That's correct.
It sounded
That's
like
correct.
you were like, he was like, he's a Maine Secretary.
He's
no. He's the main one.
He
like,
is the main man.
To. No.
Yeah, no.
The state of Maine.
For the state of Maine, he is the Secretary of State. He really laid down the law on this. So he was part of the Commission for the Voter Fraud Presidential Commission investigation into whether this voter fraud existed, which of course was led by resident scumbag in Kansas Secretary of State Chris Kobach, who, has been a longtime supporter of voter suppression.
Yes.
So while Dunlap was on this commission, the Trump administration refused to release like 8,000 documents that was related to the investigation that Trump asked for into voter fraud. Right. He was like, no, can't have those documents. So his administration was just like, no, thank you. So he had to sue the administration to get documents for the commission that the president asked for. He sued them last November. He finally got the documents this past June.
Wow.
And at that point, after reading them over, he released a statement. And his statement says, and I love this, it's one of my favorite things I've ever heard a politician say. And this is in the same week that we've had two unbelievable statements from the Kavanaugh hearings between Cory Booker and Kamala Harris. Mm-hmm. Between the two of them, I'm in my liberal heaven this week. but this is an amazing comment. And I think it should go right up there in the ranks, because he said, "We had more transparency on a deer task force than I had on a presidential commission."
Okay.
I'm going to go out and say, I don't know what a deer task force is. In my head, I want to believe it's something much cuter, because I am picturing deer in tactical gear, maybe with some guns, shooting at humans.
No, that's not
with little goggles on and orange vests and the earmuffs. Yes, that's what I'm going for. But I know that's not what it is. But either way. So he was one of the 4 Democrats who were on the 11-person commission. And he also stated that at no point did he ever see that there was widespread election fraud, that he believes, and he believes the evidence, the documents that he saw actually prove this, that the reason that this commission was brought to bear was solely to justify the comments that the president made about millions of people voting illegally. Wow. And there was never any evidence of it. And so millions upon millions of taxpayer dollars were wasted.
Listen, I just want to talk me to DJT.
Okay.
Everybody wants, but validation is for Okay. All right. We good? All right. No more wasting millions of dollars on fake commissions. Okay. You got me? All right. I got you. Okay.
Fist bumps.
Fist bumps. Boom. I'm pretty sure he listens to this podcast, so I'm sure that message across.
I mean, I do put his name in the SEO tag every single week, just in case.
Just in case.
He does search for his name. You know he does.
Okay. So, voter fraud commission. And that has been, it's like no longer in existence. They're not doing it anymore because
they're all closed down and they found literally nothing.
Right. Okay. All right. So you also found this thing about something that happened on the Beto O'Rourke. This is crazy.
Yeah, this was really weird. So the messages, a person on Twitter wrote, and that's how this came to light, was a guy on Twitter put up a screenshot of a text message that he received from someone saying, "Hi, it's Patsy here with Beto for Texas. Our records indicate that you're a supporter. We are in search of volunteers to help transport undocumented," and then it cuts off and goes to a second part of the text. And the second part says, "Immigrants to polling booths so that they will be able to vote. Would you be able to support this grassroots effort?"
What the fuck,
So
Patsy?
the way it's cut off...
What the fuck, Patsy?
I know. Ted, Raphael, is your middle name Patsy? Yeah. So basically the gist of this is that they were trying to say the Beto O'Rourke campaign was texting people to ask them to drive illegal immigrants to the polling places. So of course, you know, what do you think the Beto O'Rourke campaign did? They were like, say what? We're going to do some investigation. So, I mean, everyone, you're not texting from just outer space.
Yeah, I get things all the time like, "Hey, do you want to volunteer to text for a such and such campaign?" And it's, you know, anywhere. Like,
yeah. And I mean, it's really prevalent. Like, I donate to Beto O'Rourke's campaign, so I get texts 3 or 4 times a week. and that's fine because I like being reminded, hey, you know, this is what your money is going for. And if I had the time, I would be trying to do the phones, which is what they're asking me to do right now. I think it's a great thing. I'm just really, really, really busy right now, and I would do it if I could. Right. But either way, the messages, so they did some investigation and they found they were sent by a first-time volunteer who had signed up for a shift on the campaign's texting team under a fake name and whose real identity is still right now being investigated because this just happened last week.
Yeah.
So the campaign believes that the message reached fewer than 1,000 people, but they don't know for sure. And the staffer said that they were the only examples of unauthorized messages that the campaign had found.
That's crazy, though. Like, I just want to say one more time, what the fuck, Patsy?
Yeah.
Gosh.
Yeah. It makes me really it makes me worried about how savvy some people or how much people are willing to just be like, well, I can put my morality aside if I get what I want.
Right.
And that seems to be a real, I hate to say it's an MO of the new GOP, the way that their party is going, but
you may hate to say it, but it's true. So
yeah, it really is. I mean, what's that?
I said sorry.
Yeah. I mean, it really is. It's really frustrating. I mean, there are people in my life that I've had to be like, oh, I can't. If you're still going to defend it at this point, I really can't because it's not worth it. You're on the side of, like, you're defending Nazis. I just watched you defend a Nazi. You weren't that person 3 or 4 years ago. You're really descending into madness and you're not even recognizing the kind of echo chamber that you're inside of because you think that everyone else is a part of a conspiracy.
I think it's a little bit ironic because
we are.
So real quick, I want to talk about one more thing really quick, and we're going to round out some of our jam. So factcheck.org has this article, Fake Reporter Fraud in Alabama. It was posted on December 14, 2016. So remember when Doug Jones got elected senator in Alabama? Amazing, right? Yes. So of course, like the next day, there's this report of all these fake votes, right? So
Yes.
A popular story on Facebook claimed that 60,000 votes cast in a heavily Democratic area might be invalid. And the story was flagged by Facebook users as false, and it is. So basically, what it was a satire article. And the made-up headline was breaking. Black people in Birmingham caught voting multiple times with fake IDs. So obviously, like, if you have any sense at all, this headline is already telling you this is bullshit, right? But who ran with it was a bunch of other conservative websites that didn't have the link that the original website. So the original website was Reagan Was Right, which describes itself as a satirical, and it includes the disclaimer that everything on this website is fiction. But the story was picked up by several other sites that don't have a disclaimer. So I went to and I looked at this article, and I have to be honest, like, I've written some satire and I know I haven't written any, but only because I've just been to be funny. But if you don't write satire right, then it's not funny, right? And reading this article, like, I was a little bit like, okay, this is a little bit beyond like satire, but
yeah, it didn't.
It was not funny, and that's the thing, is it's not funny. It is very. Yeah. And their disclaimer, like, I read their disclaimer and they were like, look, like, this is how we write. So if you don't like it, just go away. And I was like, all right, that's fair. Like, you're saying, like, this is satire. Like, they are, like, their disclaimer is very clear. This is satire. Mm-hmm. But so here's the one thing that I did really, really, really appreciate about this article. They have a quote in here. It says, one poll worker in Birmingham's 412 told Breitbart. And then there's a quote. It says, we were a little bit suspicious of some people coming in, but they had what looked like to be valid IDs. We checked their pictures and signatures, and they seemed to match. And let's be honest, it can be hard to tell them apart. Okay. It's not-
yeah, that was, I have to be honest, that's the quote that I was like, what? This can't be real. No, this can't be real. And so I went to...
Well, I have to tell you real quick. So it's not the quote part that I like. It's the Breitbart link. If you hover over it, if you click on it, it takes you to a picture of a pile of donkey shit. That's the link that they have for Breitbart, which I have to agree with that is the correct link that you should go to when you click on the word Breitbart. So
yeah, I mean, I would have preferred elephant shit, but that's the only gripe I would have had.
Yeah, okay. You know what? I agree. Yeah. That should have been elephant. You are absolutely right. But anyway, that did give me a chuckle, which is the point of satire. So I guess that part of it was funny.
I will tell you that when I read this, I, of course, was like, is this satire? And I got to that quote and I was like, this has got to be fake. Because seriously, I mean, I can imagine someone saying that. I can't imagine saying that to a reporter and thinking you're going to get away with it in 2018. But stranger things have happened. Right? But the thing that got me was the guy's, his profile down at the bottom, because the guy, the writer for this, his name is, I'm sorry, his name is Flag Eagleton. And if you see his picture, it's pretty spectacular. God, I didn't even see that. It is spectacular. It talks about how he spent 7 years on welfare, picking himself up by the bootstraps.
Oh my God, this is hilarious. I totally missed that. I have to read this. Okay, Flag Eagleton is the son of an American potato farmer and a patriot. After spending 4 years in the Navy and 7 on welfare, picking himself up by the bootstraps, Flag finally got his HVAC certificate and is hard at work keeping the mobile homes of Tallahassee at a comfy 83 degrees. Ridiculous. Oh my God. Now that is satire, people. That is satire.
Yeah. That's what I'm saying, is by the time I was like, wait, this quote seems wrong, and I read that, I was like, so you have satire in you, but you gave up.
But here's the thing. I mean, I don't know if people realize this. The reason that is funny is because he's in Florida, and there's no potato farmers in Florida.
No, you can't grow potatoes in Florida.
Okay.
Yeah, that's the reason it's funny. That's the only reason. It's totally not the picture.
Or all of it. Okay, So
Yeah.
that was a good thing to end on. So let's talk really quickly about what we can do.
Yeah, let's talk about that.
You have one, and then I have a couple too. So do you want to take yours first?
I do. So mine has to do with, so say you're sitting at home and you're like, hey, what can I do about voter fraud? I believe that this is a real problem. So one of the things that you can do is you can be a poll worker. And I don't mean that kind of poll, Florida listeners.
Right.
I mean a different kind of poll. This is an election inspector.
Ooh.
And the person who is an election inspector is basically a person who volunteers at a polling site on election day. So you might be giving ballots to registered voters, you might be registering voters, you might be monitoring the equipment, you might be explaining how to use or mark on the ballot. But basically you're helping voters, you're a part of a team, you don't have to be partisan. And I'm going to put a link on the website on our blog about where to go to find out if you are qualified to become a poll worker, because all you have to basically be in most states is just a registered voter, and then there's an age and like residency requirement. And sometimes you're required to be part of a political party, which just means that you're not independent. It doesn't mean you can only be Democrats or you can only be Republicans.
Right.
It just means you have to not be independent. And that isn't even in every state. That's just in certain states. So the link I'll have allows you to check per state what the regulations are. And the reason that this is important to me is because this is the thing where I really started to understand more about politics, is because my grandmother was a poll worker and she was very proud of being a poll worker, and she did it for, she had the thigh bruises. No, I'm just teasing. She would be mortified that I just said that.
I think you have to say election poll worker.
Yeah, she was an election poll worker, and she was really proud of it. And she always said that, you know, she would never tell anybody who to vote for or who she was going to vote for. She was always very private about it, but I knew she was very democratic. She was very into making sure that people had the right to vote. She believed it was every citizen's right, and she really took that responsibility so seriously. And she kind of instilled in me this responsibility of you always should go to vote. And I was always so proud that she did that. And it was only when she really got too sick to go do it, and I know it was something she missed doing. So it's something that, to me, I feel like it's a very special thing that you can do for your community.
Yeah, that's awesome. So another thing that we can do is there's the organization called Let America Vote. They have a good website. You can go, you can volunteer. There's lots of things through them. And then our friends over at Pod Save America just started a Vote Save America. Now, I went to their website. Now, here's one thing that's important. It's important this year. You can check if you're registered to vote right there. And I did, and I am still registered. But people are being purged from voter rolls and do need to go check. So if you go to Vote Save America, you can check if you're registered to vote. They had like a little, like, you'll get answers to these questions. So they said, am I registered? Can I register? When should I register? Who and what is on my ballot? And what does all this gibberish mean? Where do I go to vote? When do I go to vote? Do I have to vote? How can I help make sure my friends and families vote too? And does it really matter? So they have, I think it's a really awesome thing that they have put together that can really, they're really trying to help people vote. I mean, that's what it's about. And we are so lucky in Oregon. Honestly, Kelly, we live in the best state for voting because we have what's called right now, what they do, they passed a law where you're automatically registered to vote when you get your driver's license. So everybody, you don't have to do voter registration drives in Oregon because everybody's registered to vote.
I think it's amazing. I don't understand why. I mean, I do understand why more states don't do it, but you know, it just seems like such a simple solution. You go get your driver's license at 16 or 17 or 38 or whatever, and you're automatically registered to vote. If you don't want to vote, don't vote. You should vote, but you're automatically on those rolls unless for some reason you're
now the only thing is
taken off. And I don't think Oregon has that.
they
law.
send you a card after for you to pick which party you want affiliated. So if you don't pick, you're automatically put into the non-affiliated party. And so that can mess you up in Oregon. If you want to vote Democrat or you want to vote Republican, you don't fill out that card and send it back, you cannot get the right primary ballot. Because in Oregon, you only get to vote in the primary registered for that party. So we also have mail-in voting in Oregon, which I adore because it does take me a couple hours to vote. And sometimes I start, do an hour, and then I come back a week later and finish it. Like you can vote on your time. You can research all the issues. You don't have to take off work. You don't have to go to a polling. You don't have to do any of that. It's amazing. And I know our Senator Ron Wyden has proposed to make that a federal law so that it would be in all states because it really is the best system. So just wanted to mention that we're super lucky in Oregon. All right. So are you ready to do some jams?
I am ready.
I think it's my turn to go first.
I think you can go first.
Okay.
I don't remember. I'm really bad at this.
I know, me too. But luckily we like each other.
Yeah, and I like your jam of the week.
I know, you would. That's why actually.
Yeah, no, I really liked it. It was one I hadn't heard before. A lot of times you send me ones and I've heard them before. So I'm like, oh yeah, I like the song. But this one I was like, oh, this is brand new to me. And I really like it.
So this is by Danielle Parente. I'm going to guess on how to say that. And the song is called The Way I Feel. And I actually heard it by, I was listening to Pandora and I was listening to my Etta James station. And this song popped up and I was like, oh, what is that? This is really good. So I downloaded it and put it onto my music. It's just this very sexy, chill, cool song. And it's very reminiscent of an Etta James, but updated. Just, oh my gosh, go listen.
Yeah. And it was great. You sent it to me earlier. And what I thought it sounded like to me was Portishead. And there is nothing wrong with anything sounding like Portishead because Portishead it is soothing, it is sexy, it is relaxing, it is a great sounding music.
Yeah.
And I've always loved Portishead, but she hasn't put anything out new in years and years. So at least that I've heard. So I was like, oh, well, now I can listen to this and I can check it out. So I'm excited about listening more to more of her stuff.
Yeah, I want to check out some more of her too. But this song, okay.
Yeah.
And then vote. The way I feel
and then vote,
is that you should.
That's right.
All right, Kelly, round us out.
So I'm going to round you out because my grandmother was a poll worker. She was an election inspector worker at the polling places. I wanted to recommend my jam of the week is a book called My Grandmother Asked Me to Tell You She's Sorry. And this is a book by Frederick Backman. I really recommend the audio if you can listen to the audiobook of it. From what I understand, it's a lot easier to follow. Not that it's a hard story to follow, but it's a bit fantasy. Now, this is the same guy who wrote the book, A Man Called Ove. His books are all set in, I believe it's Norway. And I've read a crap ton of his books this past year. I've read Beartown, I've read A Man Called Ove, I've read My Grandmother Asked You to Tell Me She's Sorry, and I just finished Britt Marie Was Here, which is part of this story as well. This book it's so beautiful. It's a story of a young girl who's 7 years old, and she's a little neurodiverse. She's very introverted. She's got a different way of looking at the world, and her best friend is her grandmother, and her grandmother is this no nonsense. She'll smoke if she wants to. She'll throw cow dung at a cop if he's chasing her type of grandmother. She's really crazy and great. And she lives in the same building with her grandmother, and they have all these neighbors, and all these neighbors have different personalities, and her grandmother passes away right in the beginning. And her grandmother used to tell her these bedtime stories to get her to go to sleep because she has high anxiety. And after her grandmother passes away, she's basically led on a scavenger hunt. And the scavenger hunt has a lot to do with the bedtime stories that her grandmother used to tell. And she finds out all this stuff about her grandmother's life that she never really knew because their lives were so based on this fantasy story. So she finds out how much of this story is actually based on her real life. And it reminded me a little bit of the movie Big Fish by Tim Burton. So to me, that's my favorite Tim Burton film, other than maybe Beetlejuice, because it's so real. It's not a remake of something. It's such a great idea, this idea of a father and a son. And this one is a girl and her grandmother. And when I read it, I saw little pieces of my grandmother's in it. And it's a beautiful story. And I just really felt like it's something that I had never read anything like it before. And I've read a lot of his stories, and I thought it was great that he could play, or he could write for this young girl and all these other characters so incredibly well. I really have enjoyed reading.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. I think our listener take a vote. Jam. Just kidding.
Vote for mine 5 times. Vote early. Vote often.
Don't forget to fill out your absentee ballot. Don't forget to fill out your absentee ballot, especially if you're an illegal immigrant. Okay, guys, we're going to be back in 2 weeks with our wrap up on this series on fake news about voting and anything voting. And so if you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to tune for that. In the meantime, you can find us on Twitter and Facebook at Podcast Fake News. You can find us on our blog at podcastfakenews.com. And you can head on over to Patreon and finally get $1 to make sure that we have good audio equipment so we don't burn your ears. And what else do we do, Kelly?
We are on Twitter on Podcast Fake News. We're on Stitcher, Spotify, iTunes.
We're on YouTube.
We're on all your favorite podcast apps.
We're everywhere where you can't find Alex Jones.
Yes.
If Alex Jones
yes, we're on no Alex Jones
we're
network.
There.
Finally.
Exactly. All right, guys. Well, until next time, don't forget, spread jam.
Not lies.